That's a great question, because multiculturalism, I think it's a very misunderstood concept. Yeah, to me, multiculturalism is when different cultures coexist in a given space, right? It can be, I don't know, like the classroom. There are multicultural classrooms. It can be a country. It can be, well, all countries are multicultural in that way, right? So sometimes multiculturalism is confused with interculturalism, and I know that sometimes it's difficult to make the difference, right? So to me, multiculturalism is that, right? When they coexist in the same space, but that's pretty much it, right? Interculturalism would be like two cultures that engage with each other and that are able to interact in a way, right?
Multiculturalism means that we all have needs and desires. We have likes and dislikes. We are different, but there is nothing wrong or threatening in that difference. We are all seeking a better life for ourselves and future generations. And there is no place for an us and them mentality in our society, today or in the future.
First of all, I think that multiculturalism is a really important matter for us as English teachers, future English teachers, because in a way we can make our students connect with what we're teaching them. You understand? Like they can connect with their own culture and they can connect with other cultures. So in that way they can relate the contents and the English language to what they're actually living in outside the classroom, like in their homes, in their personal lives, and they can connect with the language a lot more.
Multicultural education is an idea, an educational reform movement, and a process whose major goal is to change the structure of educational institutions so that male and female students, exceptional students, and students who are members of diverse racial, ethnic, language, and cultural groups will have an equal chance to achieve academically in schools. It is necessary to conceptualize this goal as a social system in order to implement multicultural education successfully. Each major variable in the school, such as its culture, its power relationship, the curriculum and materials, and the attitudes and beliefs of the staffs, must be changed in ways that will allow the school to promote educational equality for students from diverse groups.
Well, local culture is everything that we create and share as part of our lives in the place where we live or work. Local culture recognizes that people's daily knowledge comes from shared life experiences and information transmitted to them by family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. In the current context, the local culture has been modified by globalization. There is not just one culture existing in a region. There are many cultures exchanging a great amount of elements regarding each one's culture.
You may visit a new country and marvel at the way in which people in that country talk, think, or act. The language of a country binds together the citizens of a country and it allows their effective communication. Dialects and accents can help identify the various subcultures within a country.
I do believe that teachers should be trained in regards to considering the local context of the place that the students are studying in, and also their context. So for example, if I go to the south of the country, I'm going to address a different culture than if I go to the north of the country. And in this regard, pre-service teachers should be trained in order to analyze the context in which they're working. so they can work with towards creating a sense of belonging and significance, so students can connect their reality and the content that you are studying. If I am from the South and someone is teaching me about the US or the UK, maybe I'm not going to be that interested because those subjects are pretty far from my reality. I do believe that as teachers we need to consider the context of our students. So for example, if there is an important day, in this case September 11th, which happened 2 days ago, it is important for teachers to discuss that and address those issues. And the same thing happens with every important date or every important event that has happened and has had an impact on our reality and our society. In terms of percentages, I would say that we need to address local culture in a 70%. And other cultures in a 30%, but also we need to consider the interest of our students. If they want to learn about other cultures that are not local, maybe we need to work with them, make them understand the culture that they want to understand, but also make a connection with our own local culture, so we have a contrast. We compare and contrast both cultures, so we take the best things out of everything, and that's it. 70 and 30.
According to the authors, one of the main importances of teaching English through the local culture is that it gives us the chance to describe one's own culture and concerns to others. That is why the authors stand for the idea that English no longer needs to be linked to the culture of those who speak it as a first language. Teaching local culture enables students to deepen an understanding and an awareness of their cultural wealth.
Local culture, as an individual concept, does not have any negative connotation. However, in pedagogical practices, just the application of local culture can impact on the student's learning process. When teaching a second language, the local culture is significant since it depicts the student's reality through the target language.
Learning foreign cultures would benefit students and teachers as well, since people can increase tolerance among peers by knowing the similarities and differences between cultures. Likewise, the school community can have the chance to acquire new learning opportunities regarding cultural values, norms, etc. Parallel to the points given recently, teaching and learning foreign cultures would help students feel that they can use English everywhere and in any situation. Besides, they could have a global vision of the world in which they live in.
According to the authors, the major issue regarding teaching English as a particle of a foreign culture is the fact that students are not familiar with that culture, and it could lead into two possible negative scenarios. In the first one, the students will be disappointed about their own culture, and that feeling leads us to the second scenario, in which the students are so convinced that the foreign culture is better than their own that they are going to emulate all the characteristics of the new culture and leave themselves aside. Another important point that is addressed in the text is the idea that teachers who have spent little or no time outside their own countries might have difficulties understanding the diversity and complexity of English-speaking cultures. This situation makes more difficult including foreign culture in the process of teaching English as a second language, because you cannot teach something that you don't know.
Globalization. It increases the importance of culturally responsive pedagogy and also indicates that teachers need to be responsive to their students by integrating some elements of the learner's culture in their teaching process.
Yeah, a culturally responsive teacher is a teacher who changes, or who's aware of cultural changes in our society. And what this teacher has to do is to modify his practices considering those changes.
Culturally responsive pedagogy. Our classrooms are becoming more multilingual and more multinational under the irretrievable effects of globalization. Throughout time, teachers have been changing their ways of teaching and applying alternative methodologies to help their students to learn. These different methods of learning would not only increase students' awareness of the cultural elements of other cultures, but also might realize that there are numerous relationships and similarities between one culture and the other.
Difficult question, but language, the way I see it, is a system. It's a system we use in different cultures to communicate, in most cultures. A system of either spoken or written form, so people can actually communicate on the one hand, but they use it to connect on the other. It's a cultural tool that we have in different groups of people. So there is one instrumental use for language, but there is also this bonding thing. We bond through language. That's why we want to learn a new language, a different language, or a second language. Because we want to bond, we want to connect to other people that do not necessarily belong to our own group of people. So it has several different ways to be looked at. And the first one is instrumental, the other one is more a little bit more related to cultural motivations.
Language is the entire complex of phenomena associated with human vocal and auditory communications of emotions and ideas. It is called a social phenomenon because it has relevance only in a social setting. Language undergoes a continuous, though unnoticed, process of growth and change.
Interesting question. Let me see. I would say, of course, any type of increase in knowledge is a form of empowerment. And therefore, if you have the ability and you learn a second language, you would definitely have a sense of empowerment, both in expanded job opportunities, a better understanding of peoples and cultures globally, etc. Yes, it goes along with the empowerment. I think the advantages would be similar. You have increased job opportunities, increased studying opportunities, better understanding of the people who come to visit your country when you go to visit other countries. Doesn't mean that there are only advantages, but certainly there are more advantages than disadvantages to knowing a second, third, fourth, whatever number language. I know 3, by the way.
The paper indicates that utterances are not only signs to be understood and deciphered, but also they reveal 2 signs: sign of wealth, which is intended to be evaluated and appreciated; sign of authority, intended to be believed and obeyed. This depends on the relation of power that is established between the speaker's linguistic competences. Nowadays, it is rare to use language as a pure instrument of communication.
Well, as I said in the first question, I look at language that way, a way of bonding with other people, not necessarily connected to you at first. But as I was talking to you about the issue of language and power, I guess segregation plays a very important role in here. In the States, for example, it's bilingual people, they are not very... it's not a very good thing to be bilingual if you know Spanish and English. It's better just to know English, because language carries a very a heavy burden with that, Spanish language. So in there, language and power plays a very important role, or it's kind of essential for people there, the way you communicate and the language used to communicate. So I guess it's becoming more and more of an issue, and I think it has to do with the power, and it has to do with how widely spread language is, or languages are. I'm talking about the English language in particular. If English is widely spoken, that means that more people knowing English have the power over those who don't. So.
Another important aspect regarding language and symbolic power is discourse. Considering the symbolic relation of power, discourse has to be socially accepted, not only grammatically accepted. For example, it had to be heard and believed, and therefore it is going to be effective in a given state of production and circulation.
Anticipation. The concept of anticipation in discourse is related to the fact that producers have to anticipate the restriction in the market in order to help in the production of the discourse. It is highly important to mention that this anticipation is not calculated, but it is part of the language habitus.
Habitus is one of Bourdieu's most influential yet ambiguous concepts. It refers to the ingrained habits, skills, and dispositions that we possess due to our life experiences. It also extends to our taste for cultural objects such as art, food, and clothing.
In terms of relation between culture, language, and power, one of the authors we chose presented the term of mental colonization. He postulated that Western culture used English as a subtle form of imperialism that suggests the need to emulate everything Western, and from his posture, such emulation is a form of mental colonization.
This opinion is supported by some other authors, which exposed that this process of acquiring a second language intertwined with foreign cultures leads to a state in which students tend to compare their cultures with those foreign cultures, and it increases the feeling of dissatisfaction within their local culture.
Learning language alongside with culture empowers people throughout the awareness of specific characteristics given by heritage.
For English learners, they need to know that language is culture, right? Language is an expression of culture, and some people say that culture is an expression of language. So there's a relationship that is so close that you cannot break one from the other, right? So that's why it's important for language learners in any language to learn about the culture. In the case of English, there are many different cultures that actually spread and they speak English, right? So that's why we need to learn a little bit of all of them, and to have that in mind, and to be very, very careful when we speak, to also to have into consideration these cultural aspects that might be important in communication. In the end, that communication is key, right? That's what we mean to achieve through language and culture.
The application of foreign cultures through the process of second language acquisition can empower students and give them certain confidence for developing in a globalized society, since learning about cultures and language give you a linguistic power. This linguistic power would give you the tools to enhance your linguistic performance, since you would be more confident when dealing with job interviews, for example.
Moreover, they would make a meaningful progress in several areas such as cultural norms, values, language, and in terms of respect. It is necessary to mention that any increase of knowledge gives you certain power in society. Likewise, if you learn a second, third, or fourth language, will clearly widespread your mind, have a better understanding of society, and acknowledge that there are similarities and differences throughout the world, and to respect them.
The main critique that we have regarding the papers is their radical orientation. On one side, the papers that dealt with a multiculturalism process in education addressed the idea of teaching language as a process that needs to be linked purely with local cultures, leaving aside the foreign cultures. On the other side, the papers related to language and power repeated the same pattern in terms of a radical orientation inasmuch as they addressed the fact that language gives you power in terms of a linguistic capital, which placed you in either a privileged or unprivileged position based on your discourse performance.
From our perspective, the process of learning a second language must include a balance among these factors in order to achieve an integral acquisition of second languages and bring out the best of each topic. As we have mentioned before, if you are able to teach a second language considering both the local and the foreign culture, you are not only teaching the language, but empowering your students through the knowledge of culture. Thereby, they are not only going to be capable of speaking, but understanding the full content of the utterances.